Welcome to the Handcrafted Podcast, the business of making things. I'm Paul, founder of Philadelphia Table Company and the Handcrafted Network, and I believe great craftsmanship deserves great business strategy. This podcast is for makers who want to build not just great products, but a thriving business. Each episode will dive into the mindset, systems, and skills that turn craft into success. All right, guys, what's up? Welcome back to the Handcrafted Podcast. Hope everybody has been doing well and has been staying busy and all of that sort of stuff. So just a quick little personal recap. So last podcast episode was all about taking a break, going on vacation, etc., etc. So my wife and I planned a trip with our newborn son to Miami. We ended up getting to Miami totally fine. He did great. And the weather was just absolutely horrible. So we didn't get too much of a break. We actually ended up also having to come home early. My father-in-law had open heart surgery, then had a few complications. He's doing fine now, but had to head home early from the vacation. So it's just jokes on me, right? It's kind of funny to talk about how it's important to take an intentional break. I also want to, make sure, and I tell everybody I coach, everybody in the community, all of you listeners on the podcast, that I try to make this as real as possible. So I'm not going to sugarcoat things and say things are great when they're not great, etc. And so I just wanted to give you just a real life perspective of sort of what that is. And what's funny is I posted like a few stories on my personal Instagram about, like some pictures. We did get like maybe 2 sunny days out of 5 or something. And so I did do some photos and just like post them on social media. And I was like, it's so funny because people are going to look at this and be like, oh my God, they're having the best time. The weather's absolutely amazing. I wish I was there, etc., etc. So the truth is it was raining for most of the time. One day it actually rained all the way through and we ended up having to leave early. So wasn't much of a break. I'm still pretty tired and pretty exhausted. So I'm trying to figure out another time to take another break. But weather's starting to get better up here in the Northeast, so the weather is kind of feeling nice. So with that said, today is Saturday, which is a different day than I normally record the podcast. I'm preparing to work on a Murphy bed for my wife. It's something that I started in July. It's now, March, almost April, and still haven't really gotten to it. I always joke that my wife gets the stuff from my company by the worst maker with the longest queue. So sucks for her. So with that said, today I'm going to talk to you about how to make a Murphy bed. Just kidding. That's not what this podcast is about. There's plenty of other people out there that will do this. I myself am probably going to be watching a YouTube on how to make a Murphy bed. I haven't made one before. It seems pretty intuitive, but we'll see how it goes. Anyways, with that said, this podcast is brought to you by the Handcrafted Network. The Handcrafted Network is an online community of professional and semi-professional woodworkers and makers. We're starting to add some other makers to the group as well. And it's a place for you to connect with other people. It's a great place for you to learn. It's a great place for you to ask questions. It's a great place for you to get motivated and connect with others who are doing the same thing. This can be a lonely road, doing a maker business. Not a lot of people. I know me personally, I don't know a ton of people doing this. So having a community is something that I have always leaned on, and being able to find and connect with these people. I also use the community to ask questions and connect with people, so it's been absolutely awesome from there. There's also the classroom section where I've made a bunch of modules talking you through how to do certain things. One of the main things we've been talking about recently has been website optimization, website audits, all of that stuff. So if you join the group, we'll give you a website audit. Jim, my marketing guy, will create a Loom video for you, tell you the things you need to fix and change, things that are great, things are not so great. Again, we're all just truth tellers in there, so you're not going to get anything from somebody who sugarcoats and makes everything nice. So we go at it pretty hard. We want you to succeed. We want you to do really great. And people have been finding them super, super helpful. And a lot of people actually have made changes and have starting to see a lot better conversion. So it's something that I'm super proud to share. Also, if you go to the website, thehandcraftednetwork.com, you should be able to see we also have like a website optimization sheet. But if you want to do the audit, that's for the community. So handcraftednetwork.com. Or if you have any questions about it, feel free to email me, paul@thehandcraftednetwork.com. All right. Anyways, with that said, so yesterday I was in Philly. I was doing there was a Tools of the Trade convention. I did a few talks. I did one talk on Thursday about finding the right audience. And then I did a talk yesterday about luxury strategy, luxury branding, all of that sort of stuff. So today I wanted to do another version of that luxury presentation that I gave. I want to talk through it. I know I've talked about this a decent amount in the podcast. I think one of my earliest episodes also was this. So I want to go through that this way. Also, speaking of, this is actually episode 51. I didn't realize I've already done that many episodes. Last episode, once I published it, it said congrats on episode 50. So I was like, oh, wow, this is super cool. So I've been doing this for 50 episodes. Thank you so much to everybody for listening. Thank you for keeping me motivated in doing this. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for reviewing and sending me emails, all that sort of stuff. So this is podcast 51. Next week, the next podcast is going to be 52, which means, and I've done it consistently every week. So that means I'm going to have been doing it for a full year, which absolutely blows my mind. It was something that I started kind of as a fun project. I didn't expect it to get as popular and people to be as engaged with this as they have been. So thank you so much to everybody. But the audience can always grow. So please make sure you're sharing. Please make sure you're subscribing. Please make sure you're liking and commenting and doing all of those things that help sort of spread this. I'm doing this absolutely for free because I love it. But at the same time, it's great when I have feedback so I don't feel like I'm sort of just screaming into a void here. All right. With that said, let's jump into luxury strategy. So a little background. The reason why I sort of pivoted and did a deep dive into luxury strategy, there's a book called The Luxury Strategy. You can get it on Amazon. It is expensive, surprise, surprise, because it's about luxury, and you're gonna learn all about that here. So I used to, when I first started the company, I just wanted to be a company that was making tables like for the people. So it was a company that I wanted to do nice quality stuff at a decent price that everybody can afford. Surprise, surprise. You can't do that, especially if you're making stuff by hand, especially if you don't want to make an assembly line, especially if you want to be building things to kind of the highest standard. So what happened was I needed to figure out a way to raise my prices. And so I started working with a few different, you guys all know I've had coaches, I've had mentors, I've had other people I've talked to. And one of my coaches was like, hey, you need to start viewing yourself as an artist, as a luxury artist, and you need to figure out how to sell luxury. And I was like, oh God, okay, let me dive into this luxury strategy stuff, because that is what's going to be the thing that sort of creates the value, right? We're making maybe the same products, but what I need to do is maybe I need to market it differently. Maybe I need to put a different spin on it. So with that said, if you are starting your business now, or if you have a good track record of clients and things, this isn't a hammer to the system kind of thing. Somebody asked me a question yesterday after the talk where it's like, hey, overnight I'm going to just double my prices. And I was like, it's kind of a slow transition. So what I'm talking about now, you're going to take some parts and pieces of it. This is what I've done. This isn't the be-all, end-all. I'm not saying everybody needs to do this. This is what worked for me. It may or may not work for you. I do recommend starting to approach a luxury strategy. You're going to start getting more money for your projects, and you're going to start getting viewed as a bespoke company. All of us who make things by hands, that is a luxury, right? They're hiring us to make things by hand. So with that said, let's dive in. What is luxury? Luxury is not really about gold and glitz and glam. That's kind of what people think about. They think about the Miami diamonds and all of that sort of stuff. But to me, that's not really what luxury is. Luxury is if you picture, say, Porsche, or you picture a very expensive bottle of champagne, or a really nice high-end 5-star luxury hotel, right? Those aren't things that have just gold and glam everywhere. And what are the things that really make it stand out as luxury? So luxury is really about story. So talking about the legacy of the brand, which we're going to talk about, talking about why you're doing what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it differently, right? If you go into a Porsche dealership or a Mercedes, my van is a Mercedes Sprinter. I'm personally not a luxury consumer. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But when I went into Mercedes, the thing that I thought was super cool was everything on the wall was all about the legacy of Mercedes. So it was old photos of the Mercedes race cars and the prototypes and all this sort of stuff. So what they were doing is they were telling a story. So same thing with these champagnes that come from the particular region of France that's been in this family for however many years and generations and blah, blah, blah. So it's about creating the story around that. The other thing that really defines luxury is scarcity. So luxury items are unfortunately not for everybody, right? You want some people to not be able to afford you. That's what they say in the luxury strategy. And I know that's scary, but that's what sort of creates the desire. That's what makes people want it more, right? This isn't for everybody, and you can't be for everybody. You can't, if you're making stuff by hand, you can't be making things for however many people around the world. I don't know, 3 billion or something, maybe more. You can't make something for everybody. So you need to dial in on the scarcity, right? And that also helps with scaling. So, when you scale a luxury brand, it's just kind of selling less products for a higher price instead of more products at a lower price. So scarcity is a huge part of it, like things like paintings that are like, this is like a print that's 1 of 10, or, baseball cards or something like that, where they're just like a scarce, limited supply. The other thing too is intention. So things that are being built intentionally, things that are being made intentionally, things that are being, sold intentionally. So this is made specifically for a specific reason, specifically for you, is a big part of it. And another part of it is trust. So building a brand that people trust, people coming in and, trusting what you're doing. There's certain brands like Rolex people trust. People just know that that's a luxury brand, or Porsche, or any one of those, Maserati, any one of those sort of luxury things. So one thing I want to emphasize is that luxury isn't a finish, it's a feeling. So it's not about being gold or diamonds or anything like that. It's about a feeling. It's about how it makes you feel. So with that said, branding equals belonging. So like I said before with the trust, what's happening is people nowadays are buying more and more into the brand of things. So what they're looking for is they're investing in a brand, they're investing in the story. So, and people identify with the object. So it's like people buy identity, not objects. So they want to have an association with something. So people say, I have a table by Philadelphia Table Company, becomes a personal signal. It becomes a thing to show people, hey, I hired someone to make this thing for me by hand, and it's special. It's a one-of-one thing, right? And in the words of Seth Godin, people like us do things like this. So people want to have that sort of association, but it's also about creating sort of this like exclusive club of people who are able to not necessarily just afford your things, but have your things, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be about a very high price, but if it's a scarcity object, if it's one of, 3 things or 1 of 4 things, that's why famous paintings like Picasso paintings are worth so much, because it's 1 of 1. This is the only one that they ever did. So and the only reason why it's valuable is because it is 1 of 1. It's not because, Picasso put a price tag on it. So branding equals belonging, making sure you're starting to develop a brand and develop a brand story. And a quick little spin-off on branding is how important branding is. I love to phrase this question. I've heard this. I forget who it was that mentioned it before, but it's like, if Nike was to make a hotel, we all know what that would look like, right? Close your eyes, picture what that would look like. If Hilton was to make a sneaker, what would that look like? We don't know, right? Because Hilton doesn't have that sort of like strong brand association that Nike has. So branding is super important. You should start to think along those sort of terms. So doubling back on what I said before, your price can be part of your positioning. So you can naturally create scarcity by charging more for it. If less people can afford it, that means less people essentially have it, right? The other thing too is people assume quality based on price. If you are scrolling through things online and there's 5 different options, they all seem about the same, one's priced a little higher than the other, you're going to assume the one with the higher price is maybe built a little better, but it really could just be a luxury strategy. It could be a branding strategy. A great example of that is the luxury strategy book that I'm talking about. If you search luxury strategy book on Amazon, there's going to be a few books coming up about luxury strategy. One might be $20, one might be $15, but the luxury strategy book that I'm referencing is $50. It's intentionally the most expensive one. And what happens? You look at it and you go, oh, this book must have the good stuff because it's $50. It's a lot more money. Same thing with custom furniture for us. What we do is we end up marking up double, if not triple, the price of something that somebody already referenced. So if somebody brings us a table from Crate and Barrel or our house, what I like to do is be like, hey, from us, it's going to be 3x, it's going to be 2x, something like that. So they go, oh, even though the quality is the same, quality is likely not the same, but it serves the same function. Both tables you could sit and eat at. Both tables are maybe going to last a little while. But they automatically assume that the quality is a little bit better because of the pricing standpoint. The other thing too is if you have pieces on your website, and I'm going to use the furniture as an example. Say you have, 5 pieces on your website. You have a table that's $500, and then the rest of your tables are like maybe, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000. That $500 table is actually driving your value down. It's making all of those other things seem like they're not worth it, right? Because it's like, why is this table $500, but these other ones are more expensive? So positioning your pricing is really, really helpful, and it's a really great way to guide sort of a luxury strategy. The other thing I see so many people do that's a huge problem is people running sales. What happens with sales is people start to value your product for what the sale value is. We all know when you go to the sale rack at a store, or you go to Marshall's, or you go to Home Goods and things are marked down, you go, oh, this must be kind of crappy, or this must be a surplus, or this thing must only be worth, say it's marked down to $50 from $100. You go, okay, this thing's only worth $50. So what happens is, and I've never done a sale within Philadelphia Table Company. There have been plenty of times that I've been tempted to do so to try to just bring cash in the door. But what happens is it opens you up to negotiation. People start to say, hey, I saw you had this item on sale. Can I get it for that price? And you have to go back and say no. And they say, why? If you're able to offer it at this price before, why can't you offer it at this price now? Etc. So it sort of opens that sort of stuff. The other thing is it undermines your brand, because it's just making it feel like the numbers that you're putting out, the things that you're pricing are just sort of willy-nilly. You just sort of select a random price. But for me, I very intentionally price things so that they are profitable in order for us to continue to grow as a business, for me to continue to pay employees, for me to pay for health insurance, all of that sort of stuff. So there's this old story about a furniture maker whose pieces weren't selling. And so instead of lowering the price, what he did was he slowly started increasing the price more and more and more and more and more. Eventually, he ended up getting to a point where the piece was so expensive that he actually ended up selling it as opposed to not selling it. So it seems counterintuitive, but what happens is as he put more money on it, this thing became more valuable in the eyes of everybody else coming in. They go, oh, wow, this thing must be really special if they're charging this much. Think about that painting that sold, or artwork that sold, that was just a banana duct taped to a wall, right? They just put a high price tag on it, and somebody goes, I guess it's worth that, and they ended up buying it. Pricing is also a really great way to sort of filter your clients. So your price repels the wrong clients, and that's a good thing. So I know for me, I'm sure you guys all know the same thing. The person who's usually your worst client is the person who's paid the least amount of money. There have been so many times where I've gone through my queue, and it's like every time someone is the pain, I'm like, I'll bet their ticket value is low. I'll bet they have they're paying like the least amount of everybody else in the queue. Hands down, 9 out of 10 times, that's exactly what the situation is. The most ideal client is the person you say, hey, this is going to be $20,000. They say, great, send me the ACH info. I'll send it to you today. Fantastic client. So what happens is I realized is people start to if you're at a certain price point, so for tables and furniture, maybe, you're at that $2,500, $3,000 price point. For some people, that's that's kind of expensive, right? So what I say is they're reaching up for it. So what people would do is hey, I saved my whole life for this. Here's my bag of pennies to be able to pay for this. And what they do is they expect the table to sing and dance, etc. So what I did, and I could talk about this a little bit later, is I actually doubled my price on one of my most popular tables. I went from $3,300 to $6,600. I actually ended up selling more of that particular table. So what ended up happening was I was now reaching for an upper echelon of people that were now reaching down for the price. But those upper echelon of people weren't even looking at the $3,300 table, right? Those were people that were Mercedes shoppers, not wanting to shop at a Kia lot, right? They're not going to come get a luxury car on the Kia lot. They're going to go to any one of the luxury places. So the $3,300 table, they just kind of were overlooking, hey, this is crappy. I don't want to, I want something that's better. I want some better quality. And I know there have been many of you guys too, because I know I can relate to this, where it's you get somebody a present, or I'll get my wife a Christmas present. And I'm I want it to cost more, so it feels like it means more, or it feels like it's more important, or it's more special or something. Where I'm just you feel kind of weird. It's oh, well, that was only $100. I wish it was $500, so it feels like a more substantial gift. So the same thing applies for when people are purchasing something, right? If they're seeing a $3,300 or $2,500 table or something, they might say, you know what? It's probably not worth it. I'm better than that. I'm looking for something that's higher. The other thing that's really important too with luxury strategies, you need to get comfortable with no. There are going to be clients that say no once you start adding the price. So what's great about no is every no adds more room for more yeses. And it's the hardest part where for me, I even on our website, we tell a story, we tell a brand narrative within our story on our website that's basically just like, hey, we might not be the company for you. And what happens when you say that? People go, oh, wait, I want to be the person that gets your tables. Like, I want you to be the company for me. And so you kind of create this demand by almost like forcing a no in a way. So you have to get comfortable with the no's. If you're getting all yeses, it means your price too low. If you're getting 100% no's, it doesn't mean you're pricing too high. It means you're maybe fishing in the wrong pond, or your pricing is too high. So you need to sort of start to work out those sort of situations. So just a quick sidebar about how I sort of determine what sort of pricing to do at some points. So I was telling the people yesterday this sort of strategy. So if I've hit my sort of sales quota for the month, March has been a pretty good sales month. I've hit my sales quota of what I've wanted to do, what I feel comfortable doing. Now, every subsequent order from here, I'm going to charge a little bit more just to see where the new sort of like basement is, where the new ground floor is of like where I can start charging. So, maybe a $10,000 table is now a $12,000 table. And if I start getting yeses, I go, okay, cool. That $10,000 table is now $12,000 moving forward because I start to see where that leverage point is. So if I'm in a cash full position, that's what I do. If I'm in a cash hungry position, I sort of price a little bit more to sell. So that's sort of another whole other conversation that we could get into if you join the community or get on a call or whatever, or maybe in a future podcast, or if you want me to answer that more specifically. So the other thing too is I think creating friction is super helpful. Making it so it's a little bit hard for people to come in. This is a very luxury sort of approach. My showroom is appointment only. There's no pricing really listed on the website. You need to email us. And the reason why I do that is because I don't want people to be able to compare and be like, hey, the Philadelphia Table Company's tables are $8,000 and this other person's $5,000. I'm just going to go apples to apples and go with the $5,000, right? Instead, people have to reach out to me and I get to go through my sales process. I get to sell what they call the sizzle, the marketing part of it. I get to put on my sales smile and convince them about why our table is worth more, right? If it's just an $8,000 versus $5,000, go back to the other podcast we were talking about, which is a commodity. Then you're just seen as a commodity. By them having to reach out, I have to interact with them. They have to meet me. They have to learn about the company. And I always use it as a way to tell a little bit more about what it is. Same thing with like creating friction, right? If somebody, and wait lists are a feature for that sense. If you were trying to get a renovation done in your house and you talk to a contractor and you're like, hey, I want this renovation done. And the guy's like, great, I could start tomorrow. What happens? You go, wait, I don't know if I trust this guy. He has no book of work. He's just sitting around waiting for jobs to come in. He must not be trusted. He must not be valued, right? So having a wait list is pretty good. If you think about New York City, when they have some of those clubs and they want to pack them out, what they do is they intentionally make a line around the block. So everyone looks at it and goes, oh, wow, I want to be inside that line. I want to be inside that club because look how many people are willing to wait, right? When I was in Miami walking down one of the streets, there was this long line around this ice cream shop. And I was like, what the heck is going on? This must be a really popular ice cream shop. I don't know, maybe they're very slow at serving or whatever, but it alerted me to go, wow, this must be the best ice cream down in Miami if the line is this long, right? So remember that sort of wait list thing is important. Also, I always remind people that great things take time to build. If you were to order a Maserati or something, I don't know, I've never ordered a Maserati, but I would assume they don't have them on the lot. They're going to get made to order, or like a Lamborghini. Like there's like a wait list for that sort of stuff. I know there's a wait list for like Rivian. And, for those kinds of things, people are willing to wait because they understand it takes time to make those things, right? Time sometimes equals value. Time sometimes equals money. So don't be afraid of the wait list. Use it as like a feature, not necessarily a bug. And one of the biggest things that I want to remind you of is you are not your customer. So for a long time, I was like, who's going to pay this amount of money for something, right? I'm not going to. But you have to remember, like, there's a different tier of people. I'm not, like I said earlier, I'm not like a luxury consumer. So I've started to learn this stuff. I've started to dive in. I've started to like study these brands. That book is like super helpful with like taking apart what these brands are doing, what sort of like it's called like anti-marketing strategies they're doing to like bring in this higher tier level of person. So you need to get out of your mindset and you need to stop thinking, well, what would I pay? Because you need to start thinking about what would they pay? What would the upper tier, what would the top 1% pay for this? And that's where you kind of really start to think about that. So don't price for your own wallet. And one thing to remember too is artists very rarely can afford their own pieces. I mean, I know for me, I can't afford a $10,000 table. I'm not going to buy one for myself from my company, but I have tons of clients that are willing to pay for that. So you need to pull yourself out of that perspective. Lastly, one thing I want to talk about is all of this stuff only makes sense if you have the brand to back it up. So how do you present your brand in that way? You need to make sure you have a really great website, hence the website audits like we talked about in the beginning. You need to make sure you have really, really great photos. You need to like really dial in your tone. Your tone on your website is really important. So it's like sometimes less is more, like saying less is more. When you are over talking or over compensating, what ends up happening is you get like you feel like you're trying to prove yourself. And I've been in that position where people like send these really, really long emails. I'm like, dude, like I get it. Like you're just trying to like prove yourself. But if somebody's like, hey, my line's simple. Hey, we're Philadelphia Table Company. Like basically like if you don't know us, you must live under a rock, right? So simple is sometimes really better. Making sure your logo is high quality, making sure like all of your photos are high quality, spending the time to do this stuff. And it's better to have few things that are high quality than a ton of things that are not high quality. So really focus on that stuff. Focus on getting really good photos. Focus on really getting a great website together. Focus on your tone, your voice, all of that stuff. A great way to sort of work on tone and voice is to you can use like an AI. You can say, hey, I want to be like, use Rolex's tone to write an ad or to write copy for my website. You can do that sort of stuff. It's sort of the cheap way out. I spent a lot of time working on the tone. I actually hired a copywriter to also help clarify that because I wanted to get away from like the generic AI stuff. But if you don't have a ton of money and you're just getting started or getting going, maybe use AI to really help dial in a lot of that stuff. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was inspirational. Again, I wanted to say that the luxury strategy isn't something that happens overnight. You know, you're not going to double your price overnight. What you really need to be doing is start working towards this as a goal of saying, hey, I'm going to leverage this and start making more money. It took me a long time to get there. I'm still not fully there, but these are all the ideals that I'm working up to and trying to work towards to create an ever more luxury brand. I personally, and somebody asked me the other day, so what's next for Philadelphia Table Company? Where do you want to go? And I said, I just want to sell less stuff for more money. So I want my top line to grow, but I want to make less things. And that is really what luxury strategy is all about. I want to make more one-of-one pieces. I want to make really high-end luxury furniture. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share and tell people about the podcast. Also, if you have any questions you want me to include in future episodes or topics, please share them. Paul@thehandcraftednetwork.com. All right, everybody, be good. Peace.